we are here, and the audit committee is called to order. And welcome everybody. It's my first meeting as chair. Give me a break. Don't bust me too hard. So do we have a press here today? Raise your hands, press, because I don't see any familiar faces. No? There's none? Oh. Okay. Let's have some fun. No. Okay. We are in compliance, I understand, with these. Is that correct? Council? You're okay? Brian. Okay, it's all been posted. Okay, time for public comment. Public comment during this portion of the agenda will relate to matters on the agenda, which will be heard and forwarded to the next record. The amount of discussion will be 1 minute. Just items on the agenda. If you need more time, ask for it. Nobody stepping forward. Then we close the first public comment of the day. Item 4. Under our business, we have approval of the final minutes. Are the final minutes in order? From January 22nd. They are. I believe it on that. Do we have a motion? Okay, there's a motion. We don't need a second in this. Yeah, okay. Then all in favor of approval? Aye.
Aye.
Council, if you weren't here at the last meeting or this will be minutes, you may want to you don't have
How was it?
to. Were you here? Oh.
I think I was.
We voted on it last time.
Okay. See,
So to make sure.
Brian, I just want them to know that even though I'm re-elected at this advanced age.
It may be my advanced age.
Don't worry. That was covered. Okay. There were no corrections or additions anyway. Okay. Brad, you're on the spot. Time for supplemental report. Brad Snelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Currently, the following audits are in process. EUD Parking Services, this one is being led by Rad Snelding and Philip Marmorowski. It's in the planning phase. Fire and Rescue Support Services, Equipment and Vehicle Maintenance. This is Gary Phillips, and it's in the planning stage. Communications, this is Nancy Beatty, and it's in the reporting phase. Public Works Environmental, it's Brian Smith, and that's in the fieldwork phase. And Financial Assistance with SafeKey, that's Nancy Beatty, and that's in the planning stage. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Brad. Does anybody on the committee have any questions about the report at this time, and whether or not you know of anything that they need to cover that you may think they're not? Okay. Okay. Can I have a motion for acceptance of the report?
Move to approve.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
No nays? So unanimously accepted. Now, let's have an update on the audit recommendations that have been out there for a while. Brad, the status of the incomplete and the extended ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An update on the audit recommendations with the status of incomplete and extended report has been requested by the audit committee members. I'll give that report at this time. This table gives a snapshot of incomplete and extended recommendations from the annual audit recommendation follow-up as of June the 30th, 2014 to the current status of April the 23rd, 2015. You can note that all 45 incomplete recommendations are now complete. The extended recommendations went from 25 to 7, a reduction of 18 recommendations. At this time, I would like to review the remaining 7 extended recommendations. As I go through the remaining recommendations, representatives from the departments are present, as well as members of my staff who perform the audit and are responsible for reviewing the implementations, should you have any questions. The 7 recommendations in extended status are in the following departments: Building and Safety, Municipal Courts, and Operations and Maintenance. Start off with Building and Safety. There's one in this area, and it has to do with the Building and Safety, Audit of Building and Safety Permit Division. It has to do with the Hansen expired permit fee assessment. And if you remember, this Hanson expired permit project was put on hold because of N410 was being implemented. My understanding is that they are in the final stages of planning, and then after programming is complete and subsequently implemented, the city auditor's office will perform the required due diligence to verify the finding has been remedied. And as I said, the representatives from the departments are here to answer any questions. Yeah, this would be Chris Knight. Chris Knight's there if you had any questions.
It's a good time to ask a question, committee, because it took so long. 3 years before I was elected for the first time, it was due, and I know that it never worked quite right. But something was working, and then a change was or a decision was made to change. In essence, that's what the N410.
Yes, sir. The N410 will address our tracking of our permits and I'm sorry, Brad, what was the issue?
It was the Hanson expired
The
permits.
expired permit. That's always been an issue with us, and it's something that's a bit of an irritation to us because we have had instances where people have come in and started up permits that are expired. Permits are only good for 180 days. And we have been working with the designers of the project to send out notification at 30 days prior to the expiration of a permit and let the permit holder know that their permit is about to expire, and then upon expiration, say the permit is now expired, you'll have to take out new permits if you wish to start it, so that there's in continuing with our philosophy of partnering with those that take out permits, that we can track it. The notifications will be automated in N410 so that we don't have to have a labor-intensive effort of someone sitting there trying to look and see every day which permit's expired. It will be an automatic trigger. There will be an automatic email sent out, and then we hope to get a phone messaging system that the phone messaging will automatically dial the number that's in the system. There'll be an electronic voicemail sent out saying your permit is about to expire. You may want to consider renewing or extending your permit. So that will solve that problem with the auditor's findings, and will improve our customer service to our customers as well.
Any questions?
What's the expected implementation date? Are we doing user acceptance testing right now? What's the status?
I think we're just still in the design phases. Yolanda, do you know?
Yes.
Yolanda Palomo has been involved in that more than I have.
We are in the design phases right now with the IT staff, and we expect to roll it out next year.
Okay. So it'll really be by the end of the year, 2016?
By summer of next year, by June of next year,
Okay.
we'll be rolling it out, and it's going to be in phases, so I'm not sure if it will all be in place by June. But
we should see some progress and some testing of that and everything like
yes,
that.
we'll be testing before June, before we
Perfect.
go live. We'll probably be testing later this year.
Okay. Great, thank you.
At any given time, how many permits are floating out there in process?
We issue about 15,000 permits a year.
And so, at any given time, what fraction of that are in suspense? The issuance of the temporary to the completion?
I do not know how many we have that are expired. I would imagine that it's a pretty good percentage.
Well, we could say half, or it could be always 6,000 or 7,000 in limbo, or, running in there 180 days, plus the ones you've extended?
We haven't gone back and checked, but with the recession that we've gone through since, say, 2007, it could be in the tens of thousands. We have no idea, because so many projects were started and then just stopped. You can just drive along the strip itself, even though that's in Clark County, and you can see the number of projects that sit, that have no progress made on them. And many times those projects have the permits have expired because they're only good for 180 days, 6 months. And As you drive the streets, you see any project that's been sitting there for more than 6 months, that permit has expired. And we have got a count on it. I suppose eventually when we get N410 up and we're able to make a query into our databases, we can give you that number, but we haven't done any research to that effect.
It just makes me wonder, I'm not that much farther out of the pen and ink. There's a card used to keep track of things, but it begins to wonder if this after 8 years, excuse me, you have 7 years, you haven't quite got a handle on it. It is so staggering that we almost can't force it to go back to the manual system, because that's embarrassing to people that are IT. But in fact, nothing's working. Did I overstate? I'm probably overstating it. But
I wouldn't
my
say
license.
I wouldn't say nothing's working, Councilman. I think our focus right now is on the permits that are active, that are on hand with our resources that we have. We dedicate our resources to the projects that are being built. We're kind of like the Italian race car driver in the movie Cannonball Run, who got into the vehicle and ripped off his rearview mirror and said, "That what's behind me, that's not important." And we're looking at the permits that we've got now and trying to address the customer service needs that we have now. And I don't aim to be flippant about it, but the biggest thing is we're dealing with our holdovers for the permits that are active. We're dealing with the plans that we do have reviewed and turnaround times for those plans. And the permits that are expired, when people come in, Hanson does have, our staff do check, and we do catch the major portion of them, but once in a while one will slip through the cracks. And we do want to be able to, in the future, track those permits as a matter of customer service for our customers, as a part of the culture of partnership with them. Let them know that their permit has expired. I've had close friends of mine who have taken out permits and something happened and they didn't know their permit expired in 180 days and called me and said, "I didn't know that." And we had to make some provision for them on that. But as a general rule, if your permit's expired and you're not working on it, we're not too concerned with you right now. We're concerned with those that are working and doing stuff.
It sounds a little like the IT problem with the courts, and that is
Yeah. And
so much old stuff on the books.
And with N410, we should be able in the future to query the database, know how many are out there, know what we're going to do with them, be able to tag those in the future and move forward with the implementation of N410.
Okay. Any thoughts? Okay. Causes me to think a little bit, but that's not the thing right now.
It's all right. We'll take as much time as you want because Ted's trying to get to ice cream at 2 o'clock. So I would really love to delay his ice cream.
Can you blame me?
All right. Ted does not like to eat ice cream.
He doesn't need it, trust me.
Okay, all right. Vice Chair. Chairman Weiss, any questions? All right.
I don't see any lights involved at all.
Thank you. Go ahead, Madam.
You ready for the next one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the next one has to do with municipal courts. This is related to the procedures that we performed with the minimum accounting standards checklist for the Nevada courts. On this particular one, it had to do with aging reports of accounts receivable, and it also had to do with collection rates and the accounts receivable ledger, and the difference between the actual amounts owed in the courts and the potential amounts owed. If you remember from our last meeting, we learned from Dana Halvack, that the court administrator, that a new case management system was needed to meet the requirements. This system is being selected through an RFP, request for proposal process, and the system is targeted to be launched in 18 to 24 months. However, he was told that that may be a little bit optimistic.
Dana is not here. Let's have some comments. Mr. Chairman? Oh,
Mr.
yes.
Chairman. My name is Al Zakowski. I'm the budget manager for municipal courts. Fairly new employee to the city of Las
Spell your name
Vegas.
for the record.
Zakowski is Z as in zebra, O-C-H-O-W-S-K-I. Just like it sounds.
Please have the explanation.
And the question again?
The question is, I suppose you stood up because I didn't see anybody from the courts. I didn't recognize Dana. We have you.
Dana happens not to be in today.
You know, this really came to public attention in a series of stories by the Review Journal. It really hit us hard. We don't know how old our obligations are. We probably are not nearly the amount that's out there, because on an amount of $30 or $40 million that sits on our books, we haven't got an aging analysis of it because the system has done a changeover and we lost all of the age of the debts. Is that correct?
It wasn't so much as the changeover as the system itself. As an example, somebody may have owed us money from 5 years ago, and they come in last week and they make a small payment. Well, their aging report is now a week old rather than 5 years old. The system itself, although they've tried to get the developer of the system to address those issues, has been unable to do that.
So first, we beginning with this system today with full knowledge that they're seriously behind us on the periodic payment. Somebody knows how to play this game, and so we don't know that they're really quite old. So is this what we're attacking here? This part of it?
That's one of the issues that we're trying to attack for us.
Why does it take so long?
Finding the right system, I guess, may be the hardest part. We began the RFP process even before I started with the city 6 months ago. During the months of January, we interviewed some prospective vendors. Just earlier this month, we had interviews with the final two candidates. We had our people in the room with the hands-on, testing the equipment, making sure that their answers were getting addressed, the things that they needed for their job were getting addressed, and we were also making sure that the system that we were looking at would give us the type of information that a good accounting system needs. And there's going to be a recommendation, I believe, that's going to come out later this month and be before the city council by the end of the fiscal year to purchase the new system.
Okay. I want to pass the ball on to somebody else right now.
Well, yeah, I just want to know, is this going to be consistent? Are we going to be able to get this thing in place within, let's say, a year?
The goal that we're working towards is to have it in place by July 1st of 2017.
17.
I'm sorry, 2016.
Okay.
Fiscal year 17, July 1st of
Okay.
16. And the contractors that we're working with so far are saying that's a pretty aggressive schedule, but we're committed to trying to get it done by that time.
Is there anything that we can do in the meantime to kind of mitigate this risk out there or track some of these things?
My understanding is that the vendor who developed this software is no longer part of the system. And being able to recode the configuration, something he couldn't do, is probably something we can't do in the meantime either.
Okay.
You're satisfied?
Yeah.
Well, you got an answer.
Well, I got an answer. It's not the answer I wanted to hear. It's an answer.
It's not satisfied.
It's just like the other one. It takes a while for these systems to get into place. But I think we're making progress. Again, slow, incremental progress. I think if we could have another update at the next meeting, I think that would be good. Hopefully by that time, a recommendation will be proposed. There will be something that's accepted, and then we can move forward.
By that time, I would believe that the vendor will have been chosen, been approved by the city council.
Okay.
We would have begin working with the vendor. One of the first things that we're going to have to do with that vendor is put together a schedule of when things will get accomplished.
Okay. I think a quarterly update on this would be appropriate, so you can keep us abreast of where we're at with the progress of this, with certain milestones and things like that. I think that would be very helpful.
So we would be very happy to do that.
So, okay. Joe Marcella, step up.
No, fine. For the record, Joe Marcella, I'm the CIO, Chief Information Officer for the and Director of Information Technology. There's a couple of points that need to be made, and hopefully that'll help with an understanding. First, with the software development, that software that was developed for the court was developed on the fly, with the recommendations and the requirements happening as it was being developed. Terrible way to do any of that. Second is that in that the result of all of that today, there's a very clean business understanding with a good relationship with the business rules. So a selection of software can be done a whole lot more succinctly and appropriately than it was done before. We do still have, and then you may not be aware, a relationship with the developer. In the process of transferring data from the old system to the new system, there has to be a process called data mapping. In doing that, much of the old data has to be identified with some level of integrity. Then once it's moved into the new system, it has to be accurate. In that process, there's always a chance, a good opportunity, to go ahead and do those kinds of matches and then start to eliminate those things that are erroneous data and then identify those things that are exact matches.
The validation process.
Right, exactly it. And before you put the old data that that may not have any integrity into a new system, that has to be done. Once that's vetted, what usually comes out is, here's the exceptions, here's valid information, and we may have a list of folks that we might be able to collect from.
But currently, there's no real workaround for this.
No, the database evolved rather than being designed. So collection of information would be done in a haphazard fashion. It really going to take that structured move for data mapping to get it down to a science.
Poor design equals poor operation.
Exactly it.
Okay.
Exactly it. Now, what's unique is that our court attempted, and this might be more information than you need, but our court understood their business need very well back when the software was implemented. Remember that it's a traffic court. Most of their transactions were traffic-oriented, and therefore there was a whole line outside the door that for folks that needed to be serviced quickly. So they revamped their business processes outside of what was standard for most court software, which is usually the county courts and the like, to accommodate that iteration process of traffic management. To do that, the software was changed so that they could move folks through the line, and then anything that was an exception to that, DUI or anything that needed to be adjudicated, needed to see the judge, was then moved to the side and handled differently. Not something that both the vendor that was providing the software nor the court had a great deal of experience with, so that was an experiment, and the software followed. So not that these are excuses, it's really the reasons it's in the condition it is today.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful.
No, that is.
I'd like to ask the court if the original source documents, the paper citations, the court records source that determined what the final adjudicated amount was going to be, which became the liability of the offender, do they still exist?
In our current case management system, I think that there's an accurate record of what people owe us once the case has been adjudicated. The problem is there are charges that are applied to a person or a defendant that maybe never become revenues for municipal courts. They're put into the case management system, and at a later time they may be revoked, stopped, the judge may change his mind about things, and they are not real revenues for municipal courts. And that's part of the problem, I think, with step 2 of this process that was listed on the agenda.
Well, I understood that when the story came out, it had a staggering number of outstanding, 30 or 40 million, I'm just grabbing the number out there, but I knew that wasn't the amount we could ever collect. That much.
The accuracy of the information in those reports in the review journal are suspect, at least. It seems that at times they combined municipal court with justice courts, took those two things and said, this is one thing, and the accuracy, again, is to be questioned.
Did we ever prepare, did we have a CMER, did we ever have anything that kind of summarized it all as a response to that? Because this is a story that will continue. If the reporter, and we're still covering City Hall, if that person has these same thoughts, then, if he's in the room today, let's say, I don't see him, but let's say he's in the room, then he's going to be saying, it's going to take another 24 months to find out something. So, again, we have to establish, what really is owed. theoretically is collectible, really truly collectible.
That is our goal, sir.
Is that something that can parallel the process of installation of new software?
We're hoping that with the new software, we'll have that information with the conversion of the information we currently have into a new system that allows us to do things such as aging reports.
I was just wondering if there was a sampling process that could be used. And I'm going to ask Brad that question here in a minute. You know, a sampling process that could go back in and look at the experience and say, a few hundred, or just see how many in fact are uncollectible for a very common reason. Maybe they're 30 years old. You have some that old.
Yeah, there's some very old.
Or longer. So there are some things in there that really makes sense, so the city can defend itself against what is the allegations, as always portrayed in the paper, about the extremists, the extremists, frankly. But I always take that position that this is an almost unsolvable problem, and we don't know how to solve the problem. So we want to just sort of forget about it, build a new system and start over. They would like to know. I think that they stir this up frequently, so why not at least have our own consciences cleared a little bit by what we really do know that we owe, or are owed, I'm sorry. Now that can be done if the original documents are still present.
And because of my short time with the courts, I'm not sure exactly what documents exist, whether they're paper documents or they're just information that's currently in the case management system.
Any other questions?
My question would also be for Mr. Snelling, is if we do have ACL software,
We do.
and if we could maybe even recreate some of that using ACL, if it's a database, and if it maintains all the data, whether it's the original plus any payments, or I should say minus any payments, but then you could, again, potentially age it, which is one of the features of ACL software. So it might be worth undertaking a small project, not a significant amount of hours, but something that one of the auditors could do to see if we can't do that between now and the 24 to 36 to 48 months that it'll take to finally get this thing resolved.
We'll do that.
It would be a suggestion.
We'll see what we can. We do have the ACO software, and it has a lot of capabilities, but let me see. It kind of depends upon what shape the date is in.
Okay.
But
And I'd be willing to help out with that as well, based on my knowledge of ACL and to be able to offer some assistance where necessary.
okay, we'll look at it.
Good question, and thanks for that. I'll tell you, remember that in the minds of the newspaper, which is the minds, that's the public opinion, they will have that $30 or $40 million figure forever in their minds, and the city will always have that problem of a perception of such a huge number. Because in fact, it's like 3 or 4 million. That's a real away. But we don't know that it is. And I'd be curious, and you're very curious. If they're curious, they'll make like help for the council. And so why should we go through that? Anything we can do to get more, just because the stories have stopped being written right now, doesn't mean they're ready to come back here. Good reporters always have a ticket to come back and check. Okay.
And, Mr. Chair, if I can or say one more thing, the resources that are necessary to see if that's at all possible are still available. We were cautious enough to make sure that they were left under contract based on when we decommissioned their responsibility and the maintenance agreement. Plus, you have a resource within your organization that was part of the architecting of all of that. So if there is a way, and we would have to do that anyway with the new system,
Right.
to do that early, if it's possible, we at least have the resources to figure that out, and then the software could do the mining once that's defined.
The same reporter has also worked very hard doing the data dive, and frankly, I don't know if he's right or wrong, on the question of who is paying, who is being cited, who's in the courts. So that's kind of like two things going on now. We've got, because in our own records, we have a hard time rebutting anybody. We can't say they're wrong. If in fact, his inference that he's doing a bit of editorializing in his stories, that he's inferring essentially that the poor are paying more, and that we're out to get money And that's the sole reason for much of our citing and judgments. I'll bet we don't know how to answer that. I mean, we've tried. I saw Dana had some comments, but that, in the story, the last iteration of it. See, there's another one that comes up because of this long process of inability to understand our ordinance. God knows what I think of next, but it's going to cause fire and storms. So we need to have some answers. And a test of old documents can help us, or a test of the originals, get us to a more comfortable feeling about what we really do and don't have as a liability against the public. And I think it'd be good to start it rather sooner than later. Brad, thank you very much for saying you can do something in that way. Yeah, I know you can, I know you will. All right.
The last 5 extended are in the operation and maintenance department, specifically related to the audit of field operations, fueling, access, and monitoring, and have to do with fuel transaction monitoring and key fob use and oversight, and some operations policies and procedures and some standard operating procedures. And if you remember from our last meeting, we learned from Jerry Walker, Deputy Operations and Maintenance Director, that 2 new software programs were being utilized to address noted problems. Currently, he is improving the data and anticipates success in the completion of these 5 recommendations prior to fiscal year end, is what he said at that particular meeting.
You happy with the progress?
I think in talking with Jerry Walker, is someone from Jerry Walker's area here?
Jerry, Chairman Orlando Sanchez, Deputy City Manager. Jerry was en route, but he had an emergency back in the office, so he had to go, so he's not able to make it. He is happy with the progress, but with the software that he received, there's another portion that he did not account for that he thought was going to be resolved, but it's checking the volume of the storage tanks. That system is not working with the new system, so he might have to replace some of the volume metrics to see how much gas is in these storage tanks. It's about $5,000 a tank. I might forget how many tanks we have within the city, but he's looking at that. But there's something that's going to be resolved.
So we don't know for sure capacity.
Correct. Or anything's seeping out. So it ties in. It's like the checks and balances, and that we'll get the checks and balances fully engaged.
I'm sure we can go back. Okay. Any questions? Thank you for the explanation. I hope that emergency is not a personal emergency.
Oh no, it's personnel.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is a good thing, to be sounding like a broken record. When we reported last year, there were 70 issues that were incomplete or extended, and that's been reduced to 7, a 90% decrease. I would just like to thank everyone, all the departments involved, as well as the audit group, for working through these issues. I believe that you guys have made tremendous progress in the past year, and hope that we can continue to keep these numbers lower so we can keep work moving so to where we don't have a backlog similar to what we had a year ago. But good job to everyone. Hats off. I think this is great progress.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, that'll be the last time words spoken. Okay, right.
That concludes my report on that, on the follow-up.
Move to accept the report.
There's a motion to accept. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Continue. Okay, go to the next item. Brad,
Yes, this is a discussion and possible action on the audit of Building and Safety Department cashiering function. Nancy Beatty was the lead auditor on this audit, and she'll give that report.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. The City Auditor's Office completed an audit of the building and safety cashiering function. The scope of the audit was limited to the management controls, relevant to the cashiering function during fiscal year ended June 30th, 2014. Building and Safety is responsible for ensuring construction within the boundaries of Las Vegas conform to established business codes by using building permits and monitoring construction activity. The cashiering function collects fees associated with the issuance of the building permits. As noted on the slide, our audit procedures found noncompliance with the cash handling policy and check acceptance procedure. Audit procedures found noncompliance with access granting and termination policy, which showed that former city employees had access control rights to 7 out of the 20 access control groups used by Building and Safety. Improvements are needed in the cashier refund recording process. When a refund is only applied to a part of a permit, the potential exists that customers could request inspections on areas they had received a refund. Cashiers have the ability to update fee amounts without appropriate oversight and detection. Improvements are needed in the void transaction process. When a cashier was assigned the acting supervisory functions, her responsibilities included reviewing and voiding transactions. During this time, her cashiering functions were not disabled. Therefore, nothing would have prevented her from accepting payments and processing voids. I would like to thank Building and Safety employees who assisted me throughout the audit. To date, 7 out of 10 of the audit recommendations have been reviewed and closed. This concludes my briefing. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you at this time.
I have one question. We have 3 findings still open.
Right.
It looks like they're due to be closed in the next 2 weeks or so.
Right.
Is that already scheduled? Is that something that's going to happen? Or?
It's my understanding on 2 of them, what's left is to update policies and
Okay.
procedures. The fixes have already been made. It's just updating the policies and the procedures. The other one had to do with the cashier drawers with the keys.
Yeah.
It was recommended by our key locksmiths to change out the drawers, and so they're in the process now of getting those drawers made and new keys installed.
Okay, so we should see these probably resolved by our next meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure I want to do this. Chris Knight, Director of Building and Safety, is Yolanda Cuomo, so if I get stuck, I'll call her out. The 3 policies and procedures have been drafted.
Okay.
We are putting them into final form. They will be completed and implemented by May 4th. The cashier drawers, the facilities group will be on hand next Tuesday to install the cashier's drawers. So everything that is remaining of the 3 should be completed and finished by the 4th of May. So if you would have held this meeting 2 weeks from now, you would have gotten a very good report.
Okay. Thank you. Good work.
Thank you. 7 out of 10. One of the things I always caution people, I've done a lot of things before, and that is that the things you saw, the things you were able to report as closed, sometimes they have a way of reopening themselves. Humans fall back into old habits, and you really have to stay on top of it. Make sure your system's really working.
Well, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I always like to applaud Brad and his staff. We welcome audits. We like audits. I mean, that sounds strange coming from a department director, but Brad has done several audits for me in the Building and Safety Department, and each time they have helped us improve our processes, improve what we do, improve our checks and balances in our cashiering, and improve everything that we do. And we like the findings that we get out of the auditors, and we're about process improvement in Building and Safety, and Brad is very instrumental in helping us do that. And when I think I need to change something, one of the first things I do is actually ask for an audit, which people look at me and say, are you trying to shoot yourself in the head or what? But they do very fine work, and we do appreciate the work that they do.
Okay. Brad?
Well, I go ahead. I'll move to accept that report.
All right, all in favor of accepting?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
The next item is a discussion for possible action on audit of the city's administration of the Emergency Management Performance Grant. Gary Phillips was the lead auditor on this audit, and he'll give the report.
Good afternoon. The scope of this audit was limited to the fiscal year 2012 grant award, and that award equaled $391,886. Background on this: the Emergency Management Performance Grant is administered by the Nevada Department of Public Safety, Division of Emergency Management. The grant provides a vital link between state and local levels to support comprehensive emergency management, improvement of preparedness, response, and recovery for all hazards, and helps to recover from emergencies and disasters, whether natural or man-made. There is 3 findings in this audit. Non-compliance with federal guidelines on identifying grant purchased equipment, and that was annotating equipment items on CLB tags. Created an inventory management plan and a need to comply with the new fixed asset policy and procedure. Second is non-compliance with the City of Las Vegas Grant Review Committee requirements. All grant applications must go through or should go through the Grant Review Committee process. And the third is quarterly financial reports were not reviewed by the project manager, and subsequently one quarterly financial report was submitted incorrectly. We have Ted Levis and Carolyn Levering here from the department. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to entertain them.
Ready? Well, I personally think that Carolyn should come up.
My daughter Samantha.
Should we have her read the CFO?
Yeah, she was reading aloud from the.
It's always a horrible part of the They're almost done.
She's waiting on that ice cream too.
I know. Work too. Hopefully it's fine for you. All right.
Mr. Chair, is it okay if I just give a quick overview of their efforts? First off, we wanted to thank Ren and Gary and their group for working with us on this audit. As the Administrative Services Department, our policy, what we do here at the city is follow the procedures. So we welcome them to come in and take a look and identify some things that perhaps we're not following. So as Gary mentioned, this is a federal grant that comes through state emergency management. It's essentially a pass-through grant for our emergency management efforts. And we actually have a line of business that's for emergency management in administrative services, and we have like an emergency operations center out at our west yard out on Cheyenne, which is where we would all convene in case something bad happened. A lot of this line of business is funded by federal and state money. So in the course of this audit, there were 3 findings. And one was an inventory issue as it relates to the federal requirements. And essentially, we didn't have a designator for federal property. Okay, there are CFR requirements for that. We recognize that. Essentially, they just didn't have the right G on there to differentiate them from city-specific property. And so in that regard, we are working on implementing a more formal inventory management plan to meet both the city and federal requirements. The second finding had to do with an internal policy we have, and that is that grants are supposed to go through a grant review committee. Since this is like a formulaic grant that just comes through, it didn't. So the bottom line of that is we are re-looking at that policy to make sure it's appropriate and trying to determine when it's appropriate to go through a committee or not. The intent of having a grant review committee is we need to make sure that there aren't grant requirements that may take city resources beyond our ability. And so while the department might say, hey, this is a great grant and this is really good, the grant committee says, well, that's true and this would be good, but were you aware of the financial obligations long term for this grant? So that's the intent of that committee. So we're going to take a look at that policy, and we should have something, this says the 31st, but we're reviewing that policy now. And finally, the last recommendation had to do with reviewing the changes to the grant and the process by which we do that. And essentially, it goes to the state. If we're going to make a change, it needs to go to the state, and we did submit one incorrectly. So we've refined that process such that Carolyn will be reviewing each of those before it's submitted. This is something it's not like there's 50 requests for change against this grant, so it's something that we welcome. So we're prepared to move forward on these recommendations, and appreciate the efforts from our sister department.
No, my question would be on the second issue regarding, because it looks like you're seeking maybe some exemption from having to take it to the committee or to the grant review committee. And I think there is some legitimacy there, especially when I'm looking at the past amounts. What would cause concern to me is, let's say, going from 2009 to 2010, and if I understand the way it works, is it would be a 50-50 thing. If I spend $1, 50 cents comes from the federal, 50 comes from the city. Would that 50 cents? Would that be correct?
Yes.
So if we accept this grant or whatever, then we're really obligating ourselves potentially to spending that amount of money.
That's correct.
So the federal portion is $391. Our portion would be $391. So I guess if it went from $222 to $391, that's a big jump. I think it would make sense for that one to go, I'm just hypothetically speaking, think that would go to the review committee. If it stays the same or goes down, maybe not so much. I'm trying to look at the risks here, and maybe I would go through and read the risks again, but the risk is that we're overextending ourselves. But the risk could be that we're not spending enough money on something that is as important as maybe we should be spending the money on.
What I'm going to say doesn't really have specifically to do with this grant, but many times you can run into a grant where we'll be able to fund so many, like for example, so many police officers on the street. We'll be able to add 5 more officers on the street, and this grant will pay for them for 3 years. But we have an additional obligation to say that after that 3 years, we're going to pay for them. So a lot of times, that's a good reason to use a grant review committee to look for those kinds of commitments that go on beyond maybe the life of a grant. So I can understand why there could be some instances where you may not have to pass every grant through that grant committee. However, what we noted is that there was really nothing to say that any grant was exempt from it. We couldn't find anything for that, and we did note that this one didn't go through the committee. Therefore, we wrote an exception on that and made a finding out of it. But I think it brings up an issue that is larger than this particular grant. Should they go through or should they not go through? And that'll have to be something that city management's going to have to decide. But I think those are the risks, is that we can end up committing ourselves to more than what we can really want to do. So the grant committee is just like is a control mechanism that at least alerts us if we get into something like that. So like I said, this doesn't necessarily have to do with this grant, but that's a good thing about it. I think a grant review committee is a good thing. I really do.
Yeah, I agree, and my only point would be is if there's no changes, literally no changes, there's no additional potential obligations or anything, I could see where there would be a potential exemption, and I see the point that I believe that going through the process is a control in and of itself and is a very positive thing. So I can see both parts, and again, I look forward to hearing the results on this one.
Well, my own experience is the state of Nevada as a whole has been reluctant to seek grants because of the very worry about being overspent. That's been a pattern, and sometimes it's worked very much against the state of Nevada. And I think our units within the state are different. We're reluctant to take on risk because we realize that we have a boom and bust kind of revenue picture from the top to the bottom, and you can't predict what you'll have since we don't base our revenue really on property tax anymore. And so this would be inevitable. In fact, particularly every other year during a session, we find out how many millions we've missed in federal funds. It's staggering how much the state doesn't do. But the state has to have taken the risk to make the jump and spend the money. And that's where we get a little worried, because there's a lot of people who would like to spend it, but there's only a few people who will be able to vote on it. And it's usually those people who are the ones that vote on it that gets a little worried and don't act in that way. I'm sure that's why a lot of grants are not fully exploited. That's really why staff frequently don't bring a full grant to be exploited by the governing body, because the governing body is a little chicken when it comes to looking at the long term, which means raising taxes or something to raise revenue. When that grant diminishes, or if it's a good grant and it just doesn't get exploited when it should be, because they didn't vote for the money to match. So they don't want to take on the obligation of the match. I used to be the grant review committee. And I don't think the council does that. I mean, we used to do that when I say the legislature is the grant review committee. It is the approval committee. It's the one that decides to take on risk. Here, it doesn't seem to fall into the purview of the council much. And I don't know if that's because things don't come up to the council and the decisions are made at the lower level. What do you think, Orlando?
Chairman, the review committee, basically, you're absolutely correct. We checked the department's budget to see if it's within their budget, and also the long-term implications. And if we're going to go into a long-term implication, we have to make sure that we're going to budget for the next fiscal year or the year after that, or how long that obligation is going to be. So it's very thoroughly vetted with the department to make sure that we have the financial resources to support it. And we also brief out on the mayor and council, because ultimately you guys press the buttons for the budget. So if there's anything that's going to impact long-term obligation on the city, we make sure that the council is comfortable with how we're moving forward with the grants that we're going forward with.
Since long-term expense is usually payroll, people that are hired under conditions like this at a certain level are told your position will only last as long as the grant lasts. Can you explain how that should work, Carolyn or Ted, depending on the amount, percentage of the grant? Because we're talking percentages here too.
Right.
At some level.
Sure. This particular grant, the NPG grant, was developed at the federal level for the purposes of providing stability for emergency management programs throughout the nation. So it's been a fairly stable funding stream for the last 25 years. So we've been very fortunate to that regard. As far as the match requirements that go with this grant, we're, as a city, very fortunate that we overmatch this grant. We utilize the salaries and benefits of personnel already in the city that support emergency management, including fire personnel, for example. So we report actually more funds as a match to this grant than is required. And that leaves open the door for us to be able to receive additional grant funding if it should become available through deobligations from other subgrantees who don't spend their money. And at times we've also helped the state meet their match requirements when they were unable to, because they are allowed to claim our overmatch as part of their match. So we're actually really a team player statewide when it comes to participating in this particular grant. I do anticipate actually that in the next federal fiscal year we will be receiving an increase to this award. So I'm excited about that because I know that we're prepared to accept an increase. We're already making the match. So that's good news. As far as personnel is concerned, I'm an appointed position, so I'm at will anyway. We actually just created a new position that previously had been a contract position. Our contractor retired essentially, and we said, look, this is really more equitable if it's a regular full-time salary benefit position. However, the caveat to hiring this position is this is a grant-funded position. If the grant funds should cease to exist for any reason, the position ends. And that's just a reality for the kind of work that we do in emergency management. We just don't have enough resources in general fund to support the work. So everything I do is grant funded one way or another. Everything I do. I think with the exception of the purchase of fuel for my vehicle, because there's no grant that'll pay for that, everything is reimbursed by a grant.
Well, you're fortunate in this sense that the things that you grant match with are things that are considered vital services.
Yes.
People reluctant to cut. So the match should continue.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Okay, Brad?
I believe that is my presentation with this. I would like to make one comment about grants. Several years ago, we did a series of contract audits, and I plan to do a series of grant audits also, just to review the controls that are involved in that and to see, if there's some recommendations we can make related to that. So up and coming in the next year or two, well, then we will be doing some more grant audits. And one thing I will say about this EMPG grant is that when you consider where we set on the target list, we're very high. It's very little money, and we do have a big commitment here. And I think that Carolyn Levering and Ted Olivas probably do as good or better job than anybody can about keeping us on top of that. So, but grants are, I guess you can say grants are on my radar.
I move to accept this report.
There is a motion to accept. All in favor? Aye. Brad?
That's it.
We're ready to see. Thanks. I'm so lucky to have you here. That's my first meeting. I've been doing this for years. Okay. Let's if we shook the seats and made noise with any public people show up that are not workers in the city of Los Angeles, everybody fall out. Nobody appears. So it is now time for you to come up if you're, and they're not.
It scared me. He's in the newspaper elevator.
Okay. Then there are no people who should desire to speak, though. If there is no other members who want to speak, we public will adjourn at this moment.
Have good ice cream.
Ladies and gentlemen,